All right. Sorry for the delay, and thank you so much for coming. What we're going to be doing, actually, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the centrality of Central Asia, and then I'm going to stop and I ask Carson, one of the family members of Central Southwest Asia. We had a wonderful presentation yesterday. We were putting together a team of presenters, and yesterday many of you were here when Sean and Kelchi and Jacob and Isaac and Chris had wonderful presentation that was showing off the when we are talking about the capacity, capability of people going up as far as not only being intelligent but knowledgeable. That was a great show of power right there. Knowledge is power. That was a power show. So here we are going to be talking a little bit about Central Southwest Asia. Yesterday when there was we had a great panel about the Russia and Central Asia, primarily with Professor Mayer and Professor Green and Mr. Seidenschwartz. The talk that there was one question way at the end about the Russian interference within Central Asia and also in Georgia, that through these few slides that we're going to be looking at, I'm going to be elaborating on that. But then I'm going to stop after. Now we are 50 minutes late, so I'm going to continue for that additional time, and then I'll let Carson is going to be doing his presentation. Carson presentation is going to be on something complementary to a number of presentations that yesterday they were talking about the nationalism like in Syria, in Iraq as like the Ba'ath Party, and then there was the nationalism movement, Pakistan and India. I thought that this is a fascinating presentation that Carson is going to have, because he's going to be talking about the rise of nationalism in Turkey and Iran. That is complementary to those presentations. One thing that we're going to be talking about is that education is power. And this especially Central Asia, this is one major footnote, is that when we are talking about Middle East or Near East, there are quite a few different universities that have had that program for a long period of time. But when we are talking about Central Asia, very limited number of universities have this specialty. And University of Montana, Central Southwest Asia, if you look up, is the only university in the nation that has Central Southwest Asia combined as a major and a minor. So this is specialty, just as a slang, and sorry to use that, don't sell yourself cheap when you finish up with this degree, because we have been traveling on the Silk Road in Central Asia. We have gone to a number of different fascinating embassy, excellent ambassador, excellent staff, but then they are looking for people who are specialists from academic point of view, a specialty point of view in Central Asia, in history, in culture, languages. Those are the people on high demand. We're talking about 11 million Russians in Central Asia. We're talking about few of these well-educated people in Central Asia. University of Montana, University of Washington, Seattle, Harvard University, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Penn State University, University of Ohio, Columbus. These are few of these universities that they have degrees in this area. The beginning of all this is right after World War II, when Denis Senior actually started Altai studies in University of Indiana, Bloomington. And we're going to be talking about this, But then I put this from John Dewey: education is not preparation for life, education is life itself. So this is what, and my students are my heroes here. So we're going to be talking about some of these heroes who were here yesterday. And then now, when we are talking about centrality of Central Asia, in general terms, see how far we go. I have about 70 slides. I don't think that I'm going to show all of them. We are not capable of watching all of it. But in abstract type of sense, when we are talking about Central Asia and its centrality, we're going to be talking about prehistoric time, when Central Asia was divided into decentralized type of entities with various kings and queens ruling part of this land that is now referred to as Eurasia, Inner Asia. There are some synonym name. If you look up, you see that they overlap each other. So when Russians started occupying, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Russian involvement within the area. When Russians started taking over this part from the beginning of the 19th century, they entered northwest of Kazakhstan. They had no idea who these people are. So take it for granted that, we knew all these people who were Sarmatians and Sakas and Scythians and Huns. They had no idea who these people are. And primarily the study that it started, it was from the Kurgan, Mons, that they broke in and they took the treasury of those Mons, because those decentralized entity we are talking about primarily was the funerary sites. Some of them were funerary sites of kings and queens of those entities. So when we are talking about from the mid 18th century, actually the campaign that it starts, the expansion of Russian, since we are on the topic, it starts in 15th century at the time of Ivan III. It continues during Ivan IV, that Ivan the Terrible is known. But then when they get to Central Asia is at the time, is 1715, at the time of Peter the Great, that the campaign is started and breaking in these Mons or Kurgan stuff. So we're going to be talking briefly about that. Then there is an era and time within the ancient time, that there are two different indigenous or regional powers actually emerge and rule not only Central Asia but much more beyond. That is, one is Parthian Empire. That is about 480 years. They ruled the area from 200 BC to a little bit after 200 AD. Then there is Kushanid period. That is like when we are talking about from the south, from what is today part of Afghanistan, Pakistan, North India. They expand into the area as an empire, and they rule from 3032 AD to 320 AD, almost like 300 years. So that is one centrality if we want to talk about centralization of power, political, cultural, economic, and social. And then when we are talking about the aftermath of coming Islam to the area, now I have comment about the Islam that was talked about last night, not this Islam. Islam of Central Asia is very different. So when Islam comes to the area, in the heart of the Dark Ages, when we are talking about 9th and 10th century, primarily we are dealing with establishment of an empire, a kingdom called Samanid Kingdom, about 815 AD, that is, till 999. That is the time that primarily when we are talking about centralization of Central Asia, this becomes the city of Bukhara, that now one of the cities of Uzbekistan, becomes the heart of cultural activities. It is a safe haven in the heart of Dark Ages. When we are talking about Dark Ages in Europe, some of the most innovative, creative, educated people, literate people, actually end up coming to Bukhara, the capital of Samanid. And within this, if you look, I have a book on Lost Enlightenment by Frederick Starr from Johns Hopkins University. If you look it up, it shows the fact that this continues through some turbulences, that when we are talking about the invasion of the area in the 13th century, the largest invasion is Mongol invasion, that they almost depopulated the area. The invasion starts at 1220 the year and continues for a few decades. But then This golden age that started 9th, 10th century somehow is brought back by Timuri. This is like Timur and his descendants. They started ruling the area from 14th and 15th century. So Starr talks about the fact that this is the continuation of that golden age that continues through 14th, 15th century. So again, centralization of power, centrality of Central Asia we are talking about. And then when we are coming to the modern era, we're going to be talking about the independency of these states. As you see, Kazakhstan is one of them. Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan are others, and also Xinjiang on the Chinese side. And now we see this prosperity that shows the fact that last night they were so much talking about petroleum, but it's actually the golden age of natural gas. That there are 4 different pipelines going from southern Siberia, from Central Asia. 2 more have been added to it. Much more are coming. We are talking about multi-billion-dollar contracts that goes to Kazakhstan, to Turkmenistan. As a result, you see what is in front of the, when we are talking about Astana, that is from 1997, became the capital of Kazakhstan, is a new capital, brand new capital. You see what you see here is a few years old. So we're going to be elaborating, opening up some of these stuff that we talked about, these 5 different stages of centrality, and talking a little bit about contributors, pioneers to this area. Then I'm going to stop, and then Carson is going to just start his presentation and impressing you. So here is our address, College of Humanities Sciences, Central Southwest Asian Studies. Now I noticed that they have revised. We had over 300 pages. It's a little bit too much. People cannot read all of it. So they have reduced it down a little bit. This is my new book that came out like a couple of months ago, but then just in case, Central Asian Culture, Arts, and Architecture, besides 17 different conferences that I'd like to thank everyone who has been participating, supporting, contributing to these conferences. And also we had Cultures of Central Asia was also a journal that 9 of them that students actually contributed to that journal have come out already. So by any chance you wanna be part of these activities as far as taking courses or doing presentation, writing, this is, you're more than welcome. This is your home. So a little bit more pictures. I've added a number of different pictures that showing that there was a very nice presentation as far as generalization and biases people had, like showing a kind of a desert. We were talking about like Middle East, another desert Near East, another desert Central Asia. Well, yeah, these are some of the deserts we're going to be looking at. So here is Astana, Kazakhstan, and then when we are talking about this is the boom that we are talking about, the recent boom. That after now we talking referring to the what Russians or Soviets have been doing in Central Asia, primarily. All these entities are fabricated entities, colonial entities. In no history book or cultural book you find the name as Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, none of these. These are all fabricated, created between 1924 to 1936 by Mr. Stalin, especially Kazakhstan, who was actually part of the Kyrgyz Soviet Socialist Republic. Because that they massacred 40% of Kazakh, they didn't even give them a piece of land till 1936. So when we are talking about Kazakhstan, it became a real entity when we are talking about 1936. But you see that the various like pipelines that goes from Kazakhstan. Now, if you look up the Caspian Sea that you look at, the tip of Caspian Sea, what laser photos from the space shows is that Caspian Sea are sitting on 3 major reservoirs of petroleum natural gas. That on top of Caspian, the tip of Caspian Sea, you see 2 gigantic oil fields, petroleum and natural gas oil field. One is Tengiz oil field, One is Kashagan oil fields. And guess who discovered that? An American company? Chevron. So offshore, we are talking about Kashagan, and these two oil fields by itself are bigger than all oil fields of Saudi Arabia. We are talking about a petroleum, natural gas boom. Now, since we are on the map, this was not the way that the petroleum companies, because Chevron started that. If you look at ConocoPhillips is there, if you look at ExxonMobil is there. Now, almost every single U.S. companies now are active within the area. All like Dutch Shell actually won a multi-billion-dollar contract on Xinjiang not too long ago. So we are talking about competition between these gigantic multi-billion-dollar companies. Now, the question that was brought up by a gentleman that I hope that he's here, and then Professor Green referred to that Ardy is going to be talking about it. Since I feel obligated, just a couple of words about that, is that this was not the plan of the petroleum natural gas company. They said, we don't want to bother with Russia, and that sounds like trouble. There is a war going in Afghanistan. There is an unreliable government in Iran. So they found a way that it called BTC pipelines. BTC. B stands for Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. T stands for Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. And then C stands for Ceyhan. That is a port on Mediterranean Sea that is belong to Turkey. So BTC pipeline. If you look, they said that this is the way we're going to take the thing. Now, there was a question on what happened? Why all of a sudden Russia started brutalizing Georgia? You see on the map, you see this is the pipeline actually. This is Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan. You see on there. So the first pipeline goes through, the second pipeline goes through, and then this is the time that Mr. Putin emerges to power. Now, there is a lag here. It took about when the fall of the Soviet Union actually happened in 1991. It was a disintegration of all services, social, political, and like economical situation was very bad at the time of President Yeltsin. Now, elections, we have election every 4 years. They have election every 5 years. So Yeltsin was elected twice as a president, and it was a terrible situation there. Now, when we are talking about Chevron being there, being active, doing exploration. Now, the very first pipeline actually was made as a coincidence. That's why they said that, wow, Putin was the luckiest person you can ever imagine. When he comes to office, this is the first time the first pipeline is connected. So 2001, 2002. So, and he is watching the second pipeline coming through BTC, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan connection. The third pipeline is being made. The Russian forces invade Georgia. So last night, one of the questions was that, what happened there? And then their forces, thousands of Georgians, this is a total mismatch. Thousands of Georgians were massacred. They were half an hour to Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. And then he said, is this the safe way we are talking about? And the companies, the petroleum, natural gas company, what are you talking about? And he said that if you want to do anything, this was our backyard. You have to deal with me, with Russia. So when we are talking about these pipelines, this was not something originally, initially, had to be happening within this area. The other thing, the other alternative that actually petroleum natural gas company had was that we were talking about 57% of the energy of the world comes from Persian Gulf. So they said that, well, we're going to actually, now that we are going for natural gas, we're going to have natural gas coming from Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Gulf states, as a competition to the northern natural gas lines, that so we can control the price, so they cannot monopolize the economy, the market. But then people saying that why Russia, one of the, okay, the alliance with Syria, but why Russia is trying to, or Putin trying to delay the project from south, because these pipelines are going to Europe. Every single European country is getting natural gas from southern Siberia, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan. So that is part of the story, but here is Ashgabat, Turkmenistan, as a periphery. This is like the September is their Independence Day, the 14th of September. This picture was taken, and as a periphery, population of 5 million, poor, deprived. In fact, right before this natural gas exploration, the poverty level was so bad that all the doctors and nurses were fleeing the country, and the only health services was conducted in Ashgabat, the capital. The situation was that bad for that 10 years that we were talking about. Well, all of a sudden, this natural gas boom, now Turkmenistan is the 4th largest producer and exporter of natural gas. So here we are with another situation besides Kazakhstan. We are talking about Turkmenistan. And here is Turkmen map that for a period of time, Mr. Putin was taking Turkmen natural gas, selling it 5 times more to Europeans. So Turkmen said that, well, enough of that. Now the connection goes through the same line that, this is a few years ago, that somehow was interrupted by Mr. Putin, but now it goes through that, the BTC pipelines, as you see, crossing the Caspian. But also part of these pipelines goes through Russia. And as you see that when we are talking about the pipelines through Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, we are talking about peace pipeline that will somehow connect all Afghan cities and provide them with natural gas. Also, pipelines going to Shanghai has been connected 2 years ahead of time already. And when we are talking about Chinese establishing relationship with Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, pipelines already has connected to the eastern cities of China. Then we are talking about Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang, that primarily the Chinese, this has its own story, that primarily at the time of President Clinton, when there was unrest and friction because all the these states to the west of the area has been now liberated and declared as republics. Now there was friction that whether they can have an Eastern Turkestan independent entity when we are talking about Xinjiang, when we are talking about Urumqi as its capital. So, President Clinton said that, well, maybe we should have an election within this area. And Chinese said, oh, okay, well, we're going to have an election, but then give us a little bit of time. Meanwhile, millions of Han Chinese were moving to this area. Now, this is close to 4 million population, over 3.5 million In fact, if you look up 2017 is about 2.5 million population. 2018 is about 3.6, a little bit over 3.6. Like in 1 year, more than 1 million Han Chinese were moved into this area, especially like the Urumqi area. So by when we are talking about mid to late 1990, 1996, 1997, Chinese said that, oh, okay, we are ready for that election you were talking about. But then they declared that from 3 to 4% Han Chinese, the area has now 51% Chinese. So much for the democracy and election. But this is the second largest Central Asian city. Now, anybody here, I know that many of you have taken courses. What is the first Central Asian city we are talking about? From almost depopulated, no population, we are talking about 4.6 million. Kabul, Afghanistan. It's the fastest booming city within the area. Now talking about Uzbekistan and Bukhara, where that golden age that we were talking about, the starting point was 9th to 10th century, is one of the 11 cities that is connected by bullet train, as you see here, the station of Bukhara in Uzbekistan. So when we are talking about the New Silk Road, that is a phenomenon that based on that trade and commerce that went on from 2nd century BC onward through this area. Now they said that if ancient people can do this, we can do it as a modern or postmodern people. We can actually connect these cities the way that they were connected in ancient time for hundreds of years. Trade and commerce went from east to west and vice versa, and to the Indian subcontinent. So when we are talking about city of Bukhara, city of Samarkand, they were the major hub of the old Silk Road. Now they have been revived as the major hubs of the New Silk Road. That primarily the New Silk Road has 3 routes. One is southern Siberia, one goes through Central Asia, and one goes to the south. That southern area has been hit by Afghan war, Iran situation, Iraq, Syria. So that southern route that they had in mind has been postponed and delayed for God knows for how many more years. We have to wait for that. But then this is the New Silk Road that is going to be connecting 5 continents to each other. Now here, Here I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the pioneers that actually have contributed to the literature that primarily was the primary source of making the people not only to get awareness and knowledge about the area, but also penetrating from Near East, Middle East into Central Asia. Arthur Pope and Phyllis Ackerman. That primarily we had, I hope we still have, 10 volumes of book, each of these books 400 to 500 pages, about the research that they have done, the archaeological excavation that they were part of it, as far as various archaeological sites that had a lot to do with prehistoric period, ancient period. And these are some of the pioneers what we are talking about. Arthur Pope died in 1976. A few years later, a couple years later, Phyllis Ackerman died, but then major contributors to some of the literature that comes from this area. Then you are familiar with The Heritage of Central Asia by Richard Fry, that we have used this book for a number of different courses. Richard Fry from Harvard University, and he died only in 2014. But then as far as contribution, recognition of these pioneers, a very important task. And then we were talking about the lost enlightenment, the era and time between 9th and 10th century, from Bukhara that we were just looking and talking about it, into Samarkand, to the east part of Bukhara, both of the cities in today's Uzbekistan. Here is Frederick Starr from Johns Hopkins University and his book Lost Enlightenment, that shows the fact that that particular era and time, we are dealing with so many different scholars in so many different fields, as far as various sciences, into literature, poetry, and architecture and artistic type of traditions, that they have put together an encyclopedia, a collection of various pieces of literature that are unique on its own, and when we are talking about this particular time and place. And here is Denis Senior that we were talking about. There is a center called Denis Senior Center at the University of Indiana Bloomington, And as you see in the background, Altai Mountains is right between where it says Eastern Steppe and Western Steppe. This is the starting point of so many of these civilization and cultures. And when we are talking about trade and migration, that actually starts from this particular area to Indian subcontinent, to Near East, Middle East, and some of these migration towards Europe. Primarily, Denis Senior went to Altai Mountains. You see where Altai Mountains are, and conducted his research there for a few years, and then wrote his dissertation. And then when he came to University of Indiana, the very first Central Asian Studies program or department that became a department was Altai Mountain Studies. Then he changed the name a few times, but then he died a few years ago. He was about 93, 94 years old. But then when we are talking about the mother university to Central Asian Studies program, University of Indiana Bloomington is like the mother university to many other universities, including University of Montana, that some of our students graduating from they have gone, they are still like in Indiana University Bloomington. I think I'm going to stop here since we are short of time, and then if by any chance we have more time, then I'm going to talk a little bit more about other things about centrality of Central Asia. Thank you. Please welcome Carson.
Good afternoon. My name is Carson Blake. I'm a post-undergrad here. I graduated about 5 years ago under Mirdad and Artie Kia. They were both good friends and mentors of mine. So my topic today is talking about Ataturk, the creator of Turkey, and Reza Shah, the creator of modern Iran. So let's begin. Man has always struggled to achieve power and rule, but only a small few in history have ever succeeded. And of that small few, even less have had their powers or nations last past their lifetime. The two men I'm talking about today, Reza Shah and Ataturk, are two such men. We'll begin with Ataturk. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was born in 1880/81. No one knows his exact birth. He chose May 19th as his birthday in 1881. He was born in a Turkish-speaking Muslim family of Ali, Reza, Zimbabwe, and Salonika, Greece of the Ottoman Empire. He was given the name Mustafa, which means chosen. The time he was born was at the big rise of nationalism and colonialism in the world. European powers were spreading into Africa, the Middle East, and beyond, and bringing with them the notions of nationalism and pushing out the notions of religious constructs and empires. Ataturk, being born into this world, grew up seeing all of this. When he was 8 years age, his father passed away. Shortly, he moved into the country with his family, but that changed when they moved back to Salonika because his mom wanted her children to gain education. At this point, she put him in a modern school where he was a big troublemaker, caused many problems, so his grandmother had him introduced into a Quranic school, which he hated and was against. Shortly after that, he kept begging his family to let him join military school and actually secretly did the entry exam behind his mother's back. At the age of 12, he finally got what he wanted. He joined military school, and as he said it himself, it was when I entered the military preparatory school and put on this uniform that a feeling of strength came to me, as if I had become master of my own identity. And he did at this point. From here on, he would become a greater and greater man and do pretty amazing things. He soon would be surpassing many of his classmates, especially in fields of strategy and math. And at this point, it was when he was given the name Kamal, perfection, by one of his teachers. So Mustafa Kamal became the name. He went on to becoming a military cadet and continue on his training. He graduated the preparatory school in 1896 in Salonika, and from here he moved on to Manister, attending a military high school. And this is where he would meet many of his friends and also people like a man known as Enver Pasha later on, who would become one of his rivals. War was declared against Greece on April 19th, 1897. It was a short war, only lasting till December 4th, 1897. It started with Greek land forces landing in Ottoman territory, trying to take back old territory with their rise of nationalism. They wanted the old Greek, or Greece as we all know, the ancient civilization, to come back together. They wanted all that land back. At the time, Mustafa Kemal really wanted to join, and he actually tried to join the military, the armed forces fighting against the Greeks, but he was not unable to actually leave military high school. From this war, it eventually came to an end by European intervention that forced an armistice between the Ottomans and the Greeks. The Ottomans were actually pushing out the Greeks and would have been victorious, and this is where Ataturk first got his distrust against European powers, because he knew and truly believed if it would have been the other way around, where the Greeks were winning, Europe would have never got involved, and they would have let the Greeks take whatever they wanted from the Ottomans. He eventually would graduate military high school in November 1898 as second in his class. From here on, he would go to Istanbul for officer school, and this was also where he would pick up drinking, which when we get to the end you'll learn what that did to him. In 1899 he would begin military college, and this is where his true genius showed in military strategy, especially with guerrilla warfare tactics and stuff like that. This is where he started picking up ideas of Reformation and revolutionary thinking against the old Ottoman Sultan and the old forms of government. Him and many other students would, behind closed doors, secretly talk about all great leaders of the French Revolution, or they would go on to Napoleon and other rises against the old, how much they hated the old Ottoman rule, and eventually would want a greater, newer form of government. He graduated as a lieutenant in 1902 and 8th in his class, and immediately entered General Staff College. He didn't have too much attention to himself. He was not the most known compared to quite a few other officers at the time, but he did make strong friends, like the commandant of the General Military School, which later on would aid him when he would get in trouble. How he actually befriended Reza Pasha was going out and drinking. But in December 1904, he would graduate Staff College, and was 5th in his class, and from here, him and his friends wanted to join the 3rd Army in Macedonia. But before they were shipped out, they rented a flat in Istanbul where they were having meetings about revolutionary ideas and thoughts against the Sultan and all that. Eventually, though, other young officer that they assumed was their friend would join them, but was actually a spy, and turned them into the higher command of the Sultanate, which they were all disbanded and arrested and were actually going to be stripped of military honors and everything. But knowing Reza Pasha, Ataturk was able to get strings pulled, and him and his friends were released from jail, but they were all separated afterwards. A lot of them were sent to the 2nd Army or 3rd Army. He was sent to the 5th Army in Syria. On January 5th, 1905, that's when he made it to Syria. And in Syria, that's when he fully realized and saw firsthand the mistreatment of Arab citizens by the Ottomans, and he had a feeling that this would, and it did, come back and bite the Ottomans. After his time in Syria, he returned to Istanbul and joined the Young Turks, originally called the Committee for the Union of Progress, or COP, led by the triumvirate of Enver Pasha, Kemal Pasha, and Talat Pasha. He would, from here in September 1907, receive a new post in Macedonia, going originally where he wanted to go. And this would, him working with the Young Turks, lead to 1908 when they would begin their takeover. They created a coup, and they didn't take the Sultan out of power, but they pretty much just took control and used him more as a puppet and figurehead. In 1909, he finally got what he wanted. The army he joined was the 3rd Army, 17th Division, and he served under Hussein Hansu Pasha. He would stick to this unit until 1911, when this would be closed, and September would begin the Turco-Italian War. With the falling and then the collapsing of the Ottoman Empire, losing all their territories, Italy thought they would take a jump at Tripoli in northern Africa, and they went for it. And this was the first war ever to have aerial combat, and it was then that Ataturk realized how great an air force is for military combat. This is where he got his first great military honors of leadership and combat. He saw quite a few different theaters of combat in the war. He was injured himself. But eventually the Ottomans had to pull out of Tripoli to join the Balkan Wars in Southeast Europe. So they gave land to the Italians, which was a great defeat to Ataturk and many of the other Turks. With the Balkan War of Independence starting, they pushed into northern Anatolia through Southeast Europe. And the Balkans, the Albanians and Serbians alliance were taking land after land, city after city. And eventually, they would take Salonika, Ataturk's home, which he greatly hated and despised the higher command of the Ottoman Empire for the loss of his home, and saw them as just weak and ill-minded. As he said himself, how could you surrender that beautiful Salonika to the enemy? And this war, the Balkan War, would eventually end in 1913 with an armistice agreement, even though a few months later, the Second Balkan War would begin, which at the end of this war, again, it was a loss and a great suffrage to the Ottomans, and this is where Ataturk truly realized the command of the Ottoman Empire. They lacked intellect, insight, perception, adaptability, and commitment, which rendered them battlefield heroics fruitless and just lazy. At this point, Ataturk would be raised to lieutenant colonel, and then, as we all know, April 1914, the First War began. Breaking out in Europe, the Ottoman Empire originally claimed neutrality, but under the triumvirate, Talat, Enver, and Kemal joined the Central Powers and became the allies of Germany. During World War I, Ataturk would show his great military command. During 1915, Ataturk took command of the Ottoman forces of Gallipoli and actually held Gallipoli against the Australians and English, forcing them to retreat. A story about him is he was standing in the middle of the front on the firing line leading his men, where he actually was shot in the chest and dropped, and he pulled out his pocket watch. No one knows if this is an actual true story or if it's just a legend, but apparently his pocket watch saved him from being shot through the lung. In March 1917, he would gain command of the Second Army and be placed in the Caucasus fighting the Russians, which that would shortly end with the Russian Empire falling to the Bolsheviks and becoming communist. He fought a few more skirmishes all over, eventually going to Palestine and then to Germany before his war's end. But in 1918, the end of the war came, the Ottoman Empire was no more. And this is where Ataturk becomes his own man, and no one knew much about him at this point besides that he was a well-known commander. But after the Treaty of Versailles and the separation of a bunch of old allied or Central Power countries and states, there also came the Treaty of Sevres, which would be the splitting up of the Ottoman Empire. Ataturk was against this and against Europe. Ataturk's War of Independence would begin in May 1919, where he would flee with as many allies as he could into central Anatolia and begin a guerrilla warfare against the European powers and trying to gain a Republic of Turkey. his main foes he would fight are Italians and Greeks trying to get their own land in Anatolia, while the high powers of England and France of the Europeans were bickering over what to do with the fallen Ottoman Empire. This would last for a couple years, and he'd make his stranglehold in sort of central east Turkey in Ankara, which is the capital today. And they would keep pushing and fighting, him gaining as many allies as he could. And this would lead to the Conference of Lausanne in November 1922, where one of his best friends and would become his prime minister, Ismet İnönü, would lead and represent the Turkish Republic in this conference, where they actually got what they wanted, and it was signed on 24th of July 1923. Shortly following this, October 29th, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk became the president of the new Republic of Turkey. And from here, he would start changing everything. He'd be modernizing the state, starting with political, economical, and social reforms. He would go into educational reforms. He even started pushing out Islam because he saw it as a bane to the government and it should be a secular government. He redid the military, adding air corps because knowing he needed an air force. He was obsessed with airplanes. This at first was all great, and people in the cities loved all of his reforms and all of his changes, but Turks more in the rural areas with much stronger Islamic connections would start trying to fight back, which he would either just push down and cry them or just ignore them. He eventually also would change the Arabic alphabet to the Latin alphabet, another big attack against Islam, which he made a big enemy of, but he solidified a secular government that is still around today, even though Islam is pushing back into what is Turkey. He'd only rule for about 15 years, though, because on November 10th, 1938, he died of what he loved most, drinking. He had cirrhosis of the liver. Turkey would eventually be given over the reins of presidency to his prime minister, İnönü, and from on there, there's many different. He dealt with many things. Islamic groups try to rise up again, especially in politics, where there's been a couple times through Turkey's history where a military coup would happen to oust unwanted powers. They would take control for a few years and then give control back to the elections and try to do it all over again. All of those coups were successes except the most recent one under Erdogan, which some say was a false coup. So now we go to our other man.
We're going a little bit over time because we started like 50 minutes late. So
I'll try to rush through it. So the other man we're talking about is Reza Khan, born March 16th, 1878, in a small village of Alshot next to the Caspian Sea and the Bors mountain range in Iran. He was born to Colonel Abbas Khan and his mother, Afarin Khanum, who, shortly after he was born, his father would die, and his mother, not knowing anyone in the town they would return to Tehran, where she was originally from. On this trek to Tehran in 1879, Reza Shah was just a baby, and they got lost in the mountains in a heavy snowstorm and took residence in a sanctuary to Imam Zada Hasim, an old poet, Persian poet. And as Reza Shah would later say in his life, this is where I was supposed to have died. Carrying me on her back, my mother was caught in a blizzard here and took refuge for the night inside the shrine. Had it not been for Hasim, neither she nor I would have survived. And it's here that he sees himself as becoming fearless, and he would tell people he died and was reborn as a fearless man. From here, they finally would make it to Tehran and live with his uncle Abul Qasim Khan, where Khan and Reza Shah would become very close, and he would actually go under his wing, joining the military or the Cossack Brigade at the age of 15 in 1893. This Cossack Brigade was a gift from the Tsar of Russia to the Shah of Iran in 1885. It was mostly based Persian soldiers, but the officers were of Russian descent or influences. He started out as a private in a Cossack brigade, and over the next many decades, he would rise up from private to sergeant to lieutenant, second to lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, and he eventually would make his way all the way up to general in the Cossacks. He went through many battles dealing with rebels of the area, just uprisings against the Shah. He was all over the place of Iran, southern Central Asia, and things like that. It eventually would lead to World War I, where Iran was neutral, but Ottomans, Russian, and British forces still fought on Iranian soil, which he would grow great hate for them because it cost the Iranian people greatly during World War I of starvation. In a way, sort of genocide, some people argue. But after the war, he would be a lieutenant colonel by this point, and with the change of the Bolsheviks with the Russians, they would be dealing with new Russian forces of communists, not old imperial Russians. With this, it was easier for him to start pushing out Russian officers in the Cossacks and claiming higher rank from himself, which eventually he would get to himself at the top and become general. And it's also at this time he would meet a man named General Ironsides, a British officer who would help him work together to eventually oust the Shah and give himself power. In 1920, Reza Shah would engage Russian forces with Ironsides, pushing out pretty much Bolshevik revolution at that point. And then following in 1921, when the Shah would leave, Reza Shah started working together with other people to bring a small group together to eventually oust the Shah. On February 21st, Reza Khan entered Tehran at the head of 3,000 Cossacks and took the city through a military coup d'etat. Reza Khan would become Ministry of War. A friend of his, Zaid Zia al-Din, would become Prime Minister, and Ahmed Shah would lose his role. Just like what the Young Turks did with the Sultan of the Ottomans, they kept him there more as a figurehead and a puppet, but they controlled everything under that. And Reza Khan wasn't done from here. From here, he would push on ousting other ministers he did not like or did not want to work with, until eventually he was not only the Minister of War, but also the Prime Minister himself. And from here, he would work internal security, solidifying his role, his officers, and his friends, and taking power. One of the first steps he would have to deal with is the Majlis, which is the Persian form of parliament. And from here, he would eventually force his hands and their hand to give him even more power, where they would pass a bill, three big ones, but the first, that's wrong page. Okay, here it is. The Majlis recognized the supreme command of the country's defense and security forces as the special domain of Reza Khan Sadar Sepa. He shall exercise his command with complete authority within the frame of the Constitution and laws of the land. This command may not be removed without the approval of the Majlis, which gave him even more power, which he pushed even more, working and lying to the clergy, saying he supported Islam, which in truth he hated Islam even more than Ataturk. And eventually the clergy would push the Majlis to give him even more power. In October 1925, they passed the bill, "In the name of the welfare of the nation, declares the end of the Qajar monarchy and bestows the provisional government within the bounds of the constitutional and the laws of the land to Reza Khan Pahlavi. The final form of the government shall be decided by the Constituent Assembly, which shall convene for revision of Articles 36, 37, 38, and 40 of the supplement to the Constitution." So he had complete control in everything except name. And he eventually would, in the next few months, get what he finally wanted. And they passed their third act, The constitutional monarchy of Iran is vested by the Constituent Assembly on behalf of the nation, in the person of His Majesty Shah Amin Shah, King of Kings, Reza Shah Pahlavi, and shall remain in the Mel Presidency generation after generation. At this point, Reza Khan would become Reza Shah and start his monarchy. Like Ataturk in the beginning, he jumped on great reconstruction of Iran, working with modernizing roads and bringing trains, cars that were completely unknown to most of Iran at the time. He redid the military, which he would allow no outside control of military or any outside influence. It was completely under him. Other ministries of Iran, he let outside influence get involved, but the military was solely his. And from on here, he would do more than just modernize. He would allow women to get educations, join the workforce, join the military, and also made a law to all of them be unveiled. And he opened up the first university in Tehran, where the first two people to enter the university were his daughters, which greatly insulted the clergy, where they greatly insulted him, which this would originally lead to Reza Shah responding to them by going to Qom, where he walked into the mosque with his boots on, which is very insulting to Islam, demanding, "Bring me the bastard," as he said, of the head clergy member, which the man was drug out. He had him ripped out of his robes, shaved his beard off, and then told him, "You speak out against me again, I'll bring tanks. Your religion is against the modernization of Iran, the women of Iran, and if you go against it, I will destroy you." And for the next 3 years, he would do great things for Iran, but the second half of his rule in the 30s, he became more of a corrupt dictator, taking all the money and power for himself and doing things what he wants. But eventually, he'd get himself ousted from power in 1941, because during the 30s, the two men he greatly adored and supported were Adolf Hitler and Mussolini, which he had communications with them, and many communications with Adolf Hitler talking about the Abadan oil fields, which if they would have had an alliance there, who knows how World War II would have ended out. But because of that and that threat, in 1941, Russian, American, and European forces invaded Iran so fast through air, sea, and land that Reza Shah would not fight. He knew he would be slaughtered and his country would be ended. So he stood down. And he would be eventually ousted from power and replaced by his son, Mohammad Reza Shah, who was a puppet under Russian, British, and American control. Reza Shah would eventually be exiled to Africa, where he would die a few years later in 1944 from heart issues. Some say it was heartbreak from losing his country. Now, talking about both these men and what they've did, I'll get to the point of they were men that came, like Ataturk came from some background, Reza Shah came from nothing, but they're two men who singularly rose up, took power, and created complete nations by themselves. And even today, many Turks greatly appreciate and love Ataturk, and the same with Iranians. They love Reza Shah. Like, this was years ago, but I was on a trip up at a ski resort, and I met a Persian guy there, and I brought up that I have studied Reza Shah, this and that, and he just gave me a big hug and was so proud. And it was just interesting seeing something like that. That's decades later, people still have that care and hope for the man who did this. And on my ending thing is I just wanted to say these men were great leaders and created great nations. Yes, they might have done some dark things in their times of rule, but most of their country was behind them. And then you have what we have, American leadership, where we can't stop arguing and bickering amongst ourselves. And I leave you with that.
We are out of time, but then if there are any 1-2 questions, maybe we can answer before we apologize to our colleagues from CSU for the delay. Yeah. Any questions? Maybe we can have a couple questions before. All right. Thank you very much, and please welcome delegation from CSU.